October 15, 1997. Two rock climbers are rappelling down Eagles Canyon when sunlight catches something metallic 80 feet below. What they find changes everything about a mystery that haunted Millbrook, Pennsylvania, for a decade. A rusted postal cart, bent and broken, sits among scattered mail and debris. Next to it, a pistol from the 1980s, its metal corroded by years of weather. The mail inside the bags is faded but readable, all addressed to residents of Millbrook, all dated July 1987. This discovery would finally answer some questions about Robert Mitchell, the dedicated postal worker who vanished without a trace 10 years earlier. But it would also raise new ones that still haunt investigators today. The man who never missed a delivery, even in the worst storms, had apparently made his final stop at the bottom of a canyon 50 miles from his route. How did his cart end up there, and where was Robert? Before we begin, let us know where you're from in the comments and subscribe to join our community of mystery enthusiasts. Robert Mitchell was not the kind of man who disappeared. At 34, he had been carrying mail through Millbrook's quiet streets for 12 years, building a reputation that made him almost legendary among postal workers. His light brown hair was always neat under his navy USPS cap, his small mustache perfectly trimmed. Neighbors set their clocks by his arrival. Children knew to wait by their mailboxes for his friendly wave. Robert's military background showed in everything he did: his organized mail cart, his pressed blue shirt, his methodical approach to every route. He treated each delivery like a mission that had to be completed. His wife Nicole often joked that he cared more about other people's mail than his own. Their two children, Tommy and Lisa, ages 8 and 6, were proud to tell classmates their dad was the best mailman in Pennsylvania. But dedication like Robert's can sometimes lead to dangerous discoveries. The Millbrook Post Office had never employed anyone quite like Robert Mitchell. His supervisor, Darlene, kept his performance reviews in a special file. 12 years of perfect attendance, 0 complaints, commendations for service during the blizzard of 1985. Robert's military training in logistics made him incredibly efficient. He could sort mail faster than workers with 20 years of experience. His route covered the older part of town, where houses sat far apart and some driveways stretched a quarter-mile from the road. Other carriers complained about the distance, but Robert never did. He modified his metal cart to carry extra weight, reinforced the wheels himself, and planned each stop to minimize wasted time. Residents along Maple Street, Oak Avenue, and the rural roads leading to Eagles Canyon knew they could count on Robert. He delivered during ice storms, heat waves, and family emergencies. The man who prided himself on reliability was about to stumble onto something that would make him disappear forever. The morning of July 14, 1987, started like any other for Robert Mitchell. He kissed Nicole goodbye at 6:30 a.m., packed his usual lunch, and arrived at the post office by 7:15. The weather was perfect, sunny, 75 degrees, light breeze. Darlene handed him his mail bundles with a smile. His route included 247 stops that day, mostly residential deliveries with a few packages for the houses near Eagles Canyon. Robert loaded his cart methodically, checking each address twice. His first stop was Mrs. Henderson on Maple Street, who always offered him coffee. By 9 a.m. he was making steady progress through the neighborhood, waving at kids playing in yards, chatting briefly with retirees, checking their mail. Security cameras at Miller's hardware store captured him passing by at 10:43 a.m., his cart full, his expression relaxed. That footage would become crucial evidence because it was the last confirmed sighting of Robert Mitchell alive. Robert's assigned route should have kept him in central Millbrook all day. His final stops were typically the houses on Pine Ridge Road, about 15 minutes from the post office. He was scheduled to return by 4 p.m., clock out, and head home for dinner with his family. But somewhere between his usual stops and the end of his shift, Robert Mitchell vanished. His supervisor expected him back by 4:30 p.m. when he didn't return on time. By 5 p.m., Margaret was calling his house. Nicole hadn't heard from him, which was unusual because Robert always called if he was running late. By 6 p.m., sheriff's deputies were driving his route, looking for any sign of him or his cart. They found nothing. No abandoned mail, no broken-down cart, no witnesses who saw him after 10:43 a.m. Robert Mitchell had simply disappeared, along with 200 pounds of mail and his metal delivery cart. The search was about to begin, but it would take 10 years to find any real answers. Nicole Mitchell didn't sleep for 2 days. While sheriff's deputies organized search parties, she called every house on Robert's route, hoping someone had seen him. Tommy and Lisa kept asking when Daddy was coming home, and Nicole didn't know what to tell them. Sheriff Tom Bradley coordinated the largest missing person search in Millbrook's history. Volunteers combed the woods, checked abandoned buildings, and knocked on doors throughout the county. The local newspaper ran Robert's photo on the front page. Radio stations broadcast descriptions of him and his postal cart every hour. Search dogs tracked his scent to a gas station 3 miles from his route, then lost it completely. Helicopter searches covered hundreds of square miles, looking for any sign of the missing postal worker. The FBI was contacted on day 3, but they couldn't justify federal involvement yet. Robert Mitchell was just another missing person, and missing persons cases rarely ended well. By the end of the first week, the daily searches had become weekly searches, and hope was fading fast. 3 weeks after Robert's disappearance, Nicole Mitchell was falling apart. The Postal Service had been supportive, continuing his paycheck and providing counseling services, but money was becoming tight. Robert's military life insurance wouldn't pay out without a body or legal declaration of death, which could take years. Nicole took a job at the local diner, working double shifts to pay the mortgage. Tommy and Lisa stayed with neighbors after school, asking fewer questions about their father, but clearly traumatized by his absence. Nicole started her own investigation, driving Robert's route every day after work, looking for clues the police might have missed. She talked to every person who lived along his path, asking the same questions over and over. Most people were sympathetic but had no new information. A few seemed nervous, changing the subject, when she mentioned Robert's name. One man, Carl Peterson, who lived near Eagles Canyon, actually asked her to stop coming around. Nicole wondered what he was hiding. 6 months after Robert's disappearance, Nicole made a disturbing discovery. While organizing his home office, she found a notebook hidden behind his desk drawer. Inside were handwritten notes about unusual packages he'd been noticing on his route. Robert had documented several deliveries that seemed suspicious. Packages with no return addresses, always going to the same few houses near Eagles Canyon, always marked fragile, but unusually heavy. He'd noted license plates of cars that seemed to be following him and names of people who acted strangely when he delivered their mail. The final entry was dated July 13, 1987, the day before he disappeared. It read, "Something's not right. These packages feel like they contain more than documents. Going to talk to Sheriff Bradley tomorrow." Nicole took the notebook to the police immediately. Sheriff Bradley studied the notes carefully, then made a decision that would change the entire investigation. He called the FBI and requested federal assistance. Robert Mitchell hadn't just disappeared, he'd been investigating something dangerous. Special Agent Karen Marie arrived in Millbrook on a cold February morning in 1988, 7 months after Robert's disappearance. She was young for an FBI agent, only 29, but had already solved 3 major cases involving Postal Service crimes. The FBI suspected Robert had stumbled onto a mail fraud operation, possibly involving drugs or stolen goods. Agent Marie set up a temporary office in the Millbrook police station and began re-interviewing everyone who had contact with Robert. She was thorough, methodical, and skeptical of the local investigation. Many witnesses told her different stories than they'd told the sheriff's department. People who claimed they'd never seen Robert on July 14th suddenly remembered seeing him later in the day. Others who had been cooperative with local police became hostile when questioned by a federal agent. Agent Marie realized that someone in Millbrook knew exactly what happened to Robert Mitchell, but they were too scared to talk. The question was, scared of what and scared of whom? Agent Marie's investigation revealed that Millbrook was not the quiet small town it appeared to be. Intelligence reports showed that several drug trafficking operations had been using rural Pennsylvania towns as distribution points for cocaine shipments from Florida. The packages Robert had documented in his notebook matched the profile of drug deliveries, irregular shipping patterns, fake return addresses, and recipients who paid cash for overnight delivery. Marie obtained search warrants for the houses Robert had noted, but found nothing. The residents claimed they'd never received suspicious packages and didn't know what she was talking about. However, one of the houses belonged to Carl Peterson, the man who had asked Nicole to stop coming around. Peterson's phone records showed calls to numbers linked to known drug dealers in Philadelphia and Miami. His bank statements revealed cash deposits that didn't match his income as a part-time mechanic. Agent Marie was convinced Peterson was involved in Robert's disappearance, but she needed more evidence. The breakthrough would come from an unexpected source. On March 15, 1988, Agent Marie received an anonymous phone call at 2 a.m. The voice was male, nervous, and local. He claimed to know what happened to the mailman and agreed to meet at an abandoned gas station outside town. Marie arrived with backup, but the informant never showed. Instead, she found an envelope taped under a payphone. Inside was a hand-drawn map showing a location about 50 miles from Robert's normal route, near Eagles Canyon. The map marked a spot with an X and included a note. "Look for the cart." They thought nobody would find it there. The handwriting was shaky, like someone writing in the dark or under extreme stress. Marie organized a search team and headed to the canyon the next morning. The terrain was rough, with steep cliffs and thick vegetation. They spent 3 days searching the area marked on the map, but found nothing. Whoever had sent the tip either had bad information or was deliberately misleading the investigation. Marie filed the map as evidence, but she never forgot about Eagles Canyon. By the summer of 1988, Agent Marie's investigation had hit a wall. She'd interviewed over 200 people, analyzed hundreds of pieces of mail, and followed dozens of leads that went nowhere. The drug connection seemed real, but she couldn't prove it. Several residents of Millbrook had clearly lied to her, but she couldn't break their stories. The anonymous tipster never contacted her again. Robert Mitchell's family was growing impatient with the lack of progress. Nicole Mitchell called the FBI office every week, demanding updates. Tommy and Lisa were having problems in school, acting out and fighting with other children. The community was divided between those who wanted to help find Robert and those who wished the FBI would leave town. Local businesses complained that the federal investigation was hurting tourism and property values. Sheriff Bradley, who had initially welcomed FBI assistance, was now asking Marie to scale back her operation. The pressure was mounting from all sides, and Marie knew she was running out of time to solve the case. In December 1988, the FBI officially suspended active investigation into Robert Mitchell's disappearance. Agent Marie was reassigned to a terrorism case in Pittsburgh, leaving behind boxes of evidence and a community full of unanswered questions. The decision devastated Nicole Mitchell, who felt abandoned by the system that was supposed to protect her family. She hired a private investigator with money borrowed from her parents, but he found nothing new. The private investigator suggested that Robert might have left voluntarily, perhaps to escape debts or family problems. Nicole fired him immediately. She knew her husband better than anyone, and Robert would never abandon his children. The case was transferred back to the Millbrook Sheriff's Department, where it joined hundreds of other cold cases in a basement filing cabinet. Sheriff Bradley assigned one deputy to check on it monthly, but with no new leads, there was little to investigate. Robert Mitchell was becoming another unsolved mystery, another name on a list of people who had simply vanished. But someone, somewhere, knew the truth. The years passed slowly for the Mitchell family. Nicole eventually stopped driving Robert's old route, stopped calling police departments, and stopped hoping for miracle breakthroughs. She remarried in 1993 to a kind man named David who loved Tommy and Lisa like his own children. They moved to a larger house across town, trying to build new memories while honoring Robert's legacy. Tommy grew into a serious teenager who wanted to become a police officer to help solve missing person cases. Lisa became quiet and artistic, often drawing pictures of a man in a postal uniform. The Millbrook Post Office installed a memorial plaque for Robert in 1992, honoring his years of dedicated service. His route was divided among 3 other carriers, and mail delivery to the remote houses near Eagles Canyon was reduced to 3 days per week. The town gradually forgot about the missing mailman, except for a few residents who still wondered what really happened on July 14, 1987. The truth was waiting at the bottom of a canyon, rusting in the weather. Jake Morrison and Pete Collins were experienced rock climbers looking for new challenges in Pennsylvania's canyon country. The residents claimed they'd never received suspicious packages and didn't know what she was talking about. However, one of the houses belonged to Carl Peterson, the man who had asked Nicole to stop coming around. Peterson's phone record showed calls to numbers linked to known drug dealers in Philadelphia and Miami. His bank statements revealed cash deposits that didn't match his income as a part-time mechanic. Agent Marie was convinced Peterson was involved in Robert's disappearance, but she needed more evidence. The breakthrough would come from an unexpected source. On March 15, 1988, Agent Marie received an anonymous phone call at 2 a.m. The voice was male, nervous, and local. He claimed to know what happened to the mailman and agreed to meet at an abandoned gas station outside town. Marie arrived with backup, but the informant never showed. Instead, she found an envelope taped under a payphone. Inside was a hand-drawn map showing a location about 50 miles from Robert's normal route, near Eagles Canyon. The map marked a spot with an X and included a note, "Look for the cart." They thought nobody would find it there. The handwriting was shaky, like someone writing in the dark or under extreme stress. Marie organized a search team and headed to the canyon the next morning. The terrain was rough, with steep cliffs and thick vegetation. They spent 3 days searching the area marked on the map, but found nothing. Whoever had sent the tip either had bad information or was deliberately misleading the investigation. Marie filed the map as evidence, but she never forgot about Eagles Canyon. By the summer of 1988, Agent Marie's investigation had hit a wall. She'd interviewed over 200 people, analyzed hundreds of pieces of mail, and followed dozens of leads that went nowhere. The drug connection seemed real, but she couldn't prove it. Several residents of Millbrook had clearly lied to her, but she couldn't break their stories. The anonymous tipster never contacted her again. Robert Mitchell's family was growing impatient with the lack of progress. Nicole Mitchell called the FBI office every week, demanding updates. Tommy and Lisa were having problems in school, acting out and fighting with other children. The community was divided between those who wanted to help find Robert and those who wished the FBI would leave town. Local businesses complained that the federal investigation was hurting tourism and property values. Sheriff Bradley, who had initially welcomed FBI assistance, was now asking Marie to scale back her operation. The pressure was mounting from all sides, and Marie knew she was running out of time to solve the case. In December 1988, the FBI officially suspended active investigation into Robert Mitchell's disappearance. Agent Marie was reassigned to a terrorism case in Pittsburgh, leaving behind boxes of evidence and a community full of unanswered questions. The decision devastated Nicole Mitchell, who felt abandoned by the system that was supposed to protect her family. She hired a private investigator with money borrowed from her parents, but he found nothing new. The private investigator suggested that Robert might have left voluntarily, perhaps to escape debts or family problems. Nicole fired him immediately. She knew her husband better than anyone, and Robert would never abandon his children. The case was transferred back to the Millbrook Sheriff's Department, where it joined hundreds of other cold cases in a basement filing cabinet. Sheriff Bradley assigned one deputy to check on it monthly, but with no new leads, there was little to investigate. Robert Mitchell was becoming another unsolved mystery, another name on a list of people who had simply vanished. But someone, somewhere, knew the truth. The years passed slowly for the Mitchell family. Nicole eventually stopped driving Robert's old route, stopped calling police departments, and stopped hoping for miracle breakthroughs. She remarried in 1993 to a kind man named David, who loved Tommy and Lisa like his own children. They moved to a larger house across town, trying to build new memories while honoring Robert's legacy. Tommy grew into a serious teenager who wanted to become a police officer to help solve missing person cases. Lisa became quiet and artistic, often drawing pictures of a man in a postal uniform. The Millbrook Post Office installed a memorial plaque for Robert in 1992, honoring his years of dedicated service. His route was divided among 3 other carriers, and mail delivery to the remote houses near Eagles Canyon was reduced to 3 days per week. The town gradually forgot about the missing mailman, except for a few residents who still wondered what really happened on July 14, 1987. The truth was, waiting at the bottom of a canyon, rusting in the weather, Jake Morrison and Pete Collins were experienced rock climbers looking for new challenges in Pennsylvania's canyon country. They'd heard about Eagles Canyon from other climbers, but had never attempted its steep walls. The canyon was remote, requiring a 2-mile hike from the nearest road, and the rock formations were tricky even for experts. On October 15, 1997, they arrived at the canyon rim just after sunrise, planning to spend the day mapping possible climbing routes. Jake was setting up his rappelling equipment when something caught his eye far below. The morning sun was hitting the canyon floor at just the right angle, creating a reflection that seemed out of place among the rocks and vegetation. Pete looked where Jake was pointing and saw it too. Something metallic, definitely man-made, sitting in the shadows 80 feet down. They had originally planned to climb the canyon's east wall, but curiosity got the better of them. Jake checked his gear twice, then began the descent toward the mysterious object. He had no idea he was about to solve a 10-year-old mystery. Jake's feet touched the canyon floor at 9:47 a.m. What he found there would give him nightmares for years. The metallic object was a United States Postal Service delivery cart, its metal frame bent and twisted, its wheels warped beyond repair. Scattered around it were dozens of envelopes and packages, their addresses still visible despite years of weather damage. But what made Jake's stomach turn was the pistol lying next to the cart, a small caliber handgun, its metal corroded, but clearly from the 1980s. Jake called up to Pete, who immediately began his own descent with a camera. They documented everything they could see without disturbing the scene, taking photos from multiple angles. The mail was all addressed to residents of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, and dated July 1987. Some envelopes had been torn open, their contents scattered by wind and rain. Pete found a name tag caught in the cart's frame, Robert Mitchell, USPS. They climbed out of the canyon and drove straight to the nearest police station, carrying evidence of a decade-old crime. Sheriff Bradley, now 15 years older and close to retirement, received the call at 2 p.m. When Jake and Pete showed him the photographs, his hands began shaking. He immediately contacted the FBI, requesting Agent Marie's involvement, but learned she had transferred to the Washington field office. A new agent, Michael Torres, was assigned to the case. By evening, Eagles Canyon was crawling with federal investigators, crime scene technicians, and search teams. They set up floodlights and worked through the night, carefully documenting every piece of evidence. The postal cart was lifted out of the canyon using helicopters and specialized equipment. Inside the mailbags, investigators found 127 pieces of undelivered mail, all from Robert's final route. The pistol was sent to the FBI lab for ballistics testing and fingerprint analysis. But the most disturbing discovery was a partially burned notebook, its pages mostly destroyed but still containing fragments of Robert's handwriting. The final legible words were chilling. "They know I know." FBI forensic experts worked for 3 weeks analyzing evidence from the canyon. The postal cart showed signs of severe impact damage consistent with being thrown or pushed from a great height. Metal fragments embedded in the cart matched the canyon's rock composition, proving it had been there for many years. The pistol was traced to a gun shop in Philadelphia, sold in 1986 to a man named Vincent Kowalski, who had no known connection to Millbrook. Kowalski's criminal record included drug trafficking arrests in the 1980s, but he died in a car accident in 1991. The notebook pages revealed more of Robert's investigation into suspicious mail deliveries, including names and addresses that matched Agent Marie's old files. Soil samples from the canyon contained traces of human blood, but it was too degraded to provide DNA evidence. The most puzzling finding was that some of the mail had been opened and resealed, suggesting someone had searched through Robert's delivery bags after he disappeared. Someone had been looking for specific packages, and they might have found what they were seeking. When news of the discovery reached Nicole, now Nicole Patterson, she drove to Eagles Canyon immediately. Sheriff Bradley tried to prepare her for what investigators had found, but nothing could have prepared her for seeing Robert's cart, twisted and broken at the bottom of the ravine. She sat in her car for an hour, crying for the husband she'd lost and the answers she'd never get. The discovery proved Robert hadn't abandoned his family, but it raised new questions about how he died and who was responsible. Nicole met with Agent Torres, sharing Robert's hidden notebook and her memories of the investigation. She told him about Carl Peterson and the other residents who had acted strangely after Robert's disappearance. Torres listened carefully, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. When Nicole asked if they would finally arrest the people responsible, Torres was honest with her. After 10 years, most evidence had been destroyed or forgotten. The people who killed Robert might never face justice, but at least the family would have closure. Nicole wasn't sure closure was enough. News of the discovery spread through Millbrook like wildfire. The quiet town was suddenly full of reporters, FBI agents, and curiosity seekers. Carl Peterson, now 67 and suffering from emphysema, was questioned extensively but denied any involvement in Robert's disappearance. His alibi for July 14, 1987, was thin. He claimed to be home alone, watching television, but there was no evidence linking him to the crime. Other residents who had acted suspiciously during the original investigation were also questioned. Most stuck to their old stories, but a few revealed new details. Mrs. Elizabeth Crenshaw, who lived near Peterson, admitted she'd seen strange cars coming and going from his property in the summer of 1987. She'd been too scared to tell police at the time because Peterson had threatened her dog. Another neighbor, Bill Martinez, revealed that Peterson had asked him to lie about seeing Robert's postal cart on the day he disappeared. These revelations painted a picture of a community paralyzed by fear, but they still weren't enough to build a murder case. Agent Torres's investigation confirmed what Agent Marie had suspected in 1988. Robert Mitchell had stumbled onto a drug trafficking operation. DEA records showed that Millbrook had been a way station for cocaine shipments traveling from Florida to New York and Boston. The operation used rural mail routes to transport drugs in packages disguised as legitimate deliveries. Rural mail carriers, like Robert, were perfect unwitting accomplices because they rarely questioned package contents and had access to remote areas where drug handoffs could occur undetected. The investigation revealed that several residents near Eagles Canyon had been part of the operation, receiving cocaine shipments through the mail system and distributing them to dealers in larger cities. Robert's notes had identified the key players in the network, making him a threat that had to be eliminated. The tragedy was that Robert had planned to report his suspicions to authorities the day after he disappeared. If he had acted one day earlier, he might still be alive. Instead, his dedication to duty had led him into a deadly trap. Based on evidence from the canyon and witness statements, investigators reconstructed Robert's final day. He had delivered mail normally until about 11 a.m., when he received a package that felt suspicious. Instead of delivering it immediately, he drove to a secluded area to examine it more closely. The package contained cocaine, confirming his worst fears about the trafficking operation. Robert decided to document everything and contact authorities, but he was being watched. Drug dealers who had been monitoring his activities realized he had discovered their operation. They followed him to the remote area near Eagles Canyon, where they confronted him. What happened next was unclear, but investigators believed Robert was forced to drive his cart to the canyon's edge. His refusal to cooperate with the drug dealers led to violence. The dealers pushed his cart over the cliff, destroying evidence of their operation and sending a message to anyone else who might interfere. Robert's body was never found, but investigators believed it was disposed of separately from the cart. The drug trafficking operation in Millbrook had been more sophisticated than anyone realized. Court documents revealed that several local officials had been paid to look the other way, including a postal supervisor who ensured that suspicious packages weren't inspected. The operation had connections to organized crime families in Philadelphia and New York, with enough money and influence to intimidate witnesses and corrupt investigations. When Robert disappeared, the drug dealers immediately began destroying evidence and silencing potential witnesses. Several residents who might have testified were threatened or paid to forget what they'd seen. The anonymous tip that led Agent Marie to Eagles Canyon in 1988 had been a deliberate misdirection designed to waste investigative resources and buy time for the criminals to escape. By 1997, most of the key players in the drug operation were dead, in prison for other crimes, or had disappeared. The few survivors were old men with fading memories and no incentive to confess to a decades-old murder. The pistol found in Eagles Canyon led investigators to Vincent Kowalski, a small-time criminal who had worked as muscle for various drug operations in the 1980s. Kowalski's rap sheet included arrests for assault, drug possession, and weapons violations, but he had never been convicted of murder. Phone records from 1987 showed calls between Kowalski and Carl Peterson in the weeks before Robert's disappearance. Bank records revealed that Kowalski had received a $5,000 cash payment in July 1987, with no legitimate source for the income. Friends and associates described Kowalski as a violent man who bragged about solving problems for people willing to pay. His ex-girlfriend told investigators that Kowalski had returned from a trip to Pennsylvania in July 1987 with new clothes and expensive jewelry, claiming he'd taken care of some business. Unfortunately, Kowalski's death in 1991 meant he would never face justice for Robert's murder. The gun evidence was circumstantial, and without Kowalski's testimony, prosecutors couldn't prove who pulled the trigger. Carl Peterson became the focus of intense investigation, but the elderly man maintained his innocence despite mounting evidence. His property was searched multiple times, revealing hidden compartments in his garage and basement that could have been used to store drugs. Soil samples from his backyard showed traces of chemicals consistent with cocaine processing, but the evidence was decades old and legally questionable. Peterson's financial records showed unexplained income throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, followed by a dramatic decrease after Robert's disappearance. Neighbors reported that Peterson had been paranoid and reclusive since 1987, rarely leaving his property and refusing to talk to strangers. His health was failing, and doctors said he had less than a year to live. Agent Torres made several attempts to get Peterson to confess, appealing to his conscience and offering immunity in exchange for information about other members of the drug network. Peterson listened politely, but never admitted to any wrongdoing. He would take his secrets to the grave, leaving investigators with strong suspicions, but no concrete proof. The biggest mystery remained. Where was Robert Mitchell's body? Extensive searches of Eagles Canyon and surrounding areas found no human remains. Investigators believed the drug dealers had disposed of Robert's body separately from his cart, possibly in a different location entirely. Some theories suggested the body had been buried on private property, burned or dumped in a river or lake. Without Robert's remains, the case could never be prosecuted as a murder, only as a kidnapping and destruction of federal property. The FBI offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of Robert's body, but no credible tips were received. Nicole Patterson organized volunteer search parties that combed forests, abandoned buildings, and remote properties throughout central Pennsylvania. Psychics and dowsers contacted the family claiming they could locate the body, but their efforts proved fruitless. The absence of Robert's remains haunted his family and frustrated investigators. After 10 years, hope of finding his body was fading, but the search would continue. The discovery at Eagles Canyon shattered Millbrook's image as a safe, quiet community. Residents learned that their town had been a hub for drug trafficking, that their neighbors might have been criminals, and that a beloved postal worker had been murdered for trying to do the right thing. Property values plummeted as people avoided the area associated with drugs and violence. The post office installed new security measures and changed mail delivery procedures to prevent future trafficking attempts. Several longtime residents moved away, unable to reconcile their memories of peaceful small-town life with the reality of organized crime in their midst. Others became obsessed with the case, forming amateur detective groups and conspiracy theories about who was really responsible for Robert's death. The annual Memorial Day parade began, including a tribute to Robert Mitchell, and the local veterans organization established a scholarship fund in his name. But for many residents, the discovery had poisoned their sense of home forever. Robert's children, now adults, struggled to process the discovery of their father's cart. Tommy, 21, and studying criminal justice, felt vindicated that his father hadn't abandoned the family, but angry that his killers would likely never be punished. He changed his major to forensic science, determined to develop skills that might help solve cold cases like his father's. Lisa, 19, and an art student, created a series of paintings depicting the canyon discovery that won several awards but left her emotionally drained. Both children had spent years wondering if their father had left voluntarily, and learning about his murder was both a relief and a new trauma. They supported their mother's decision to pursue civil lawsuits against suspected participants in the drug operation, even though the legal prospects were slim. Tommy began his own investigation into the case, using social media and genealogy websites to track down people who had lived in Millbrook in 1987. His efforts uncovered new witnesses, but no smoking gun evidence. Nicole Patterson hired a team of lawyers to pursue wrongful death lawsuits against Carl Peterson and other suspected participants in the drug operation. The civil cases had a lower burden of proof than criminal charges, requiring only a preponderance of evidence rather than proof beyond reasonable doubt. Peterson's lawyers argued that their client was a sick old man being persecuted for crimes he didn't commit. They claimed the FBI had no solid evidence linking Peterson to Robert's death, only circumstantial connections and neighborhood gossip. The legal battle dragged on for 2 years with depositions, document discovery, and expert testimony about the drug trafficking operation. Several witnesses who had refused to cooperate with criminal investigators were compelled to testify in the civil cases. Their testimony revealed more details about the drug network and Peterson's role in it, but still fell short of proving murder. In the end, Peterson agreed to a confidential settlement that provided some financial compensation to Robert's family, but no admission of guilt. The settlement amount was never disclosed, but it was rumored to be substantial. Agent Torres had worked hundreds of cases during his FBI career, but the Robert Mitchell investigation haunted him. He had clear evidence of a drug trafficking operation, strong circumstantial evidence of murder, and multiple witnesses who corroborated parts of the story. But the passage of time had degraded physical evidence. Key suspects had died, and witnesses had fading memories or incentives to lie. Torres knew who was responsible for Robert's death, but knowing and proving were different things. The prosecutor's office reviewed the case multiple times but declined to file charges, citing insufficient evidence for a conviction. Torres retired from the FBI in 2005, but he kept copies of the case files in his home office. He occasionally received calls from amateur investigators or true crime enthusiasts asking about the case. Torres always told them the same thing: the evidence was there, but justice was another matter. He believed Robert Mitchell's killers had gotten away with murder, and that failure would follow him to his grave. In 2010, the Robert Mitchell case was featured on several true crime television shows and podcasts, generating renewed public interest. The shows presented evidence that hadn't been made public before, including photographs of the canyon discovery and interviews with investigators. Viewers called in hundreds of tips, most of them useless, but a few containing intriguing new information. One caller claimed to have seen Robert's postal cart being loaded onto a truck in 1987, but his credibility was questionable. Another caller said her deceased father had confessed to participating in the murder, but she had no proof of his involvement. The media attention also attracted the attention of genealogy researchers who used DNA analysis to identify remains found in other locations, hoping one might be Robert Mitchell. None of the remains matched Robert's profile, but the efforts demonstrated ongoing public fascination with the case. The shows portrayed Robert as a hero who died trying to stop drug dealers, cementing his legacy as a symbol of Postal Service dedication. 20 years after the canyon discovery, the Robert Mitchell case remained officially unsolved. Most of the original suspects were dead, including Carl Peterson, who died in 2001 without ever confessing to his role in the drug operation. The case files filled several boxes in the FBI's cold case archives, reviewed periodically but never actively investigated. New forensic techniques had been applied to evidence from the canyon, but the results were inconclusive. DNA analysis of blood traces found no matches in criminal databases, and fingerprint evidence was too degraded to be useful. The passage of time had made witness memories unreliable, and document trails incomplete. Yet investigative interest persisted, driven partly by Robert's family and partly by law enforcement officers who refused to accept that some crimes would never be solved. The case had become a touchstone for discussions about rural drug trafficking, Postal Service security, and the challenges of investigating decades-old murders. Robert Mitchell's name appeared in training materials for postal inspectors and FBI agents, ensuring his story would be remembered. Nicole Patterson devoted her later years to keeping Robert's memory alive and advocating for missing persons' families. She established the Robert Mitchell Foundation, which provided support services to families of postal workers killed in the line of duty. The foundation also funded research into mail security and drug trafficking prevention. Nicole spoke at conferences and training sessions, sharing lessons learned from her family's ordeal. She emphasized the importance of early federal involvement in missing persons cases and the need for better communication between local and federal law enforcement agencies. Nicole remarried happily and built a good life with her second husband, but she never forgot her first love or stopped seeking justice for his murder. She visited Eagles Canyon every year on the anniversary of the discovery, leaving flowers at the spot where Robert's cart was found. In interviews, Nicole said she had found peace with not knowing exactly what happened to Robert, but she still hoped someone would eventually tell the truth about his final moments. Despite extensive investigation, crucial questions about Robert Mitchell's death remained unanswered. Investigators never determined exactly when or how he was killed, whether he suffered before dying or what happened to his body. The identity of his killers was strongly suspected, but never proven in court. The full extent of the drug trafficking operation remained unclear, including how many people were involved and how much money was at stake. Some investigators believed the operation was connected to larger criminal organizations, but those connections were never definitively established. The case raised disturbing questions about corruption in small-town America and the vulnerability of federal employees to criminal retaliation. It highlighted the dangers faced by postal workers who might inadvertently discover criminal activity during their daily routines. The investigation revealed how effectively criminal organizations could intimidate communities and obstruct justice through threats and bribery. These systemic issues extended far beyond Robert Mitchell's individual case, suggesting that similar crimes might be occurring elsewhere without detection or prosecution. Eagles Canyon became a place of pilgrimage for true crime enthusiasts and a source of nightmares for local residents. The remote location, once popular with hikers and rock climbers, was now associated with murder and drug trafficking. Some visitors came to pay respects to Robert Mitchell's memory, leaving flowers and personal items at the discovery site. Others came seeking thrills or hoping to find additional evidence overlooked by investigators. The canyon's reputation made it difficult for legitimate outdoor enthusiasts to enjoy the area without thinking about the crime that had occurred there. Local businesses complained that the canyon's notoriety hurt tourism and made it harder to attract visitors to the region. Environmental groups worried that increased foot traffic from crime tourists was damaging the canyon's ecosystem. The site had become a monument to unsolved crime, a reminder that even in America's most peaceful communities, violence could lurk beneath the surface. The canyon would forever be linked to Robert Mitchell's name and the mystery of his disappearance. The Robert Mitchell case became a study in the challenges of rural law enforcement and federal-local cooperation. Police academies used the case to teach officers about the importance of recognizing drug trafficking patterns and protecting federal employees who might witness criminal activity. The case highlighted how small-town police departments could be overwhelmed by complex criminal investigations requiring federal resources and expertise. It demonstrated the need for better communication between agencies and more aggressive pursuit of early leads in missing persons cases. The investigation revealed how criminal organizations could exploit rural areas and intimidate local communities into silence. Training materials emphasized the importance of protecting witnesses and informants who might provide crucial information about organized crime. The case also showed how the passage of time could make prosecutions impossible, even when investigators had strong evidence of criminal activity. Law enforcement officials studied the case to understand how drug traffickers adapted their methods to avoid detection, and how postal services could be exploited for criminal purposes. Robert Mitchell's murder had consequences that extended far beyond his immediate family and community. The U.S. Postal Service implemented new security protocols for rural routes, including regular check-ins with supervisors and enhanced screening of packages. Mail carriers received training on identifying suspicious deliveries and reporting potential criminal activity. The case influenced federal legislation aimed at protecting postal workers and strengthening penalties for crimes against federal employees. Drug enforcement agencies studied the case to understand how trafficking organizations used mail systems and rural communities. The investigation contributed to broader efforts to combat drug trafficking in small-town America. Academic researchers used the case to study the social impact of organized crime on rural communities and the long-term effects of unsolved murders on families and neighborhoods. The case became part of criminology curricula at universities across the country. Journalists and documentary filmmakers continued to examine the case, ensuring that Robert Mitchell's story remained in public consciousness as a cautionary tale about the hidden dangers of rural drug trafficking. Advances in forensic technology continued to offer hope for solving Robert Mitchell's murder decades after his disappearance. DNA analysis techniques that didn't exist in 1987 were applied to evidence from the canyon, though results remained inconclusive. Digital mapping and satellite imagery helped investigators search areas that had been inaccessible during the original investigation. Social media platforms allowed for unprecedented public participation in cold case investigations, with amateur detectives sharing theories and information online. Genealogy databases offered new possibilities for identifying suspects and victims through family DNA connections. Ground-penetrating radar and other search technologies were used to look for Robert's remains in areas previously searched manually. Cell phone tower data and digital communications records provided new avenues for investigating suspects who were still alive. However, the passage of time continued to work against investigators as witnesses died and physical evidence degraded. The case demonstrated both the potential and limitations of technology in solving decades-old crimes. Each new technological advancement brought renewed hope to Robert's family, even as the likelihood of resolution continued to diminish. In 2020, 33 years after Robert's disappearance, the FBI conducted what was likely its final major investigation into the case. New agents reviewed all existing evidence with fresh eyes, using advanced analytical techniques and modern investigative methods. They interviewed surviving witnesses, many now elderly and with failing memories. The investigation focused on remaining unanswered questions: the location of Robert's body, the full extent of the drug trafficking network, and the possibility that some participants were still alive. Investigators used genealogy databases to identify previously unknown relatives of suspects, hoping to find family members who might have knowledge of the crime. They re-examined financial records and property transfers from the 1980s and 1990s, looking for evidence of drug money or attempts to hide assets. The investigation generated several new leads, but no breakthrough discoveries. Agents concluded that while they had moral certainty about who was responsible for Robert's death, the passage of time had made criminal prosecution impossible. The case would remain officially open but inactive, waiting for an unlikely confession or discovery. Today, Robert Mitchell's case remains one of Pennsylvania's most notorious unsolved murders. His postal cart sits in an FBI evidence warehouse, a twisted metal reminder of a crime that shocked rural America. The canyon where it was discovered has returned to its natural quiet, though hikers still sometimes find faded memorial items left by visitors. Nicole Patterson, now in her 70s, continues to hope for closure, but has made peace with the likelihood that she'll never learn exactly what happened to her first husband. Tommy Mitchell became a detective specializing in cold cases, driven by his father's unsolved murder. Lisa Mitchell-Torres creates art that explores themes of loss and justice, her father's story woven through her work. The drug dealers who killed Robert are likely all dead now, taking their secrets to unmarked graves. But Robert's legacy lives on in Postal Service security protocols, law enforcement training programs, and the memories of a community forever changed by his disappearance. Some mysteries are never solved, but they're never forgotten. In Millbrook, Pennsylvania, people still remember the mailman who never came home and the discovery that changed everything while explaining nothing. The questions remain. Where is Robert Mitchell? Who will finally tell the truth? And will justice ever be served for a man who died trying to do what was right? The haunting case of Robert Mitchell reminds us that missing person mysteries can unfold in the most unexpected ways. This mailman disappeared without a trace in 1987, creating one of the most compelling, unsolved mysteries in small-town America. Cold case files like this demonstrate how true crime stories often involve ordinary people who vanished under mysterious circumstances. The discovery at Eagles Canyon turned a missing persons investigation into a suspenseful tale of drugs, corruption, and cover-ups. Such disappearance stories show us that even in quiet communities, people can vanish without explanation, leaving families searching for answers for decades. Missing persons cold cases remind us that behind every unsolved disappearance lies a family still hoping for closure. These true crime mysteries prove that sometimes the most chilling suspense stories are those where justice remains elusive and the vanished are never found.